Hey there, it's Jenn Ferguson with Artistic Painting Studio. And today I got a fabulous project for you. We are going to be working on a stainless steel tumbler with our gorgeous transparent foils. Hey guys, I'm going to take you through the full process of working on a tumbler. This is a brand new one, referred to as a 24-ounce plump. And we are just going to go ahead and get it out of the box. And I always try to put the lids back in the plastic and in the box so I know that I can find those. The first thing I always like to do is give the tumblers a good sand. A lot of times there is a film or something that they put on them to keep them looking so pretty. So we're going to use some 220 grit sandpaper and give this a good sanding. Okay. As you can notice, the top and the bottom are slightly tapered. So I usually go around on the top and the bottom just to make sure that I get that edge. And then as well, we want to do the entire bottom up here. Just want to make sure that you have broken through any of that film or whatever they have put on the tumbler to keep it so nice and pretty looking. And then I will always clean off with 91% isopropyl alcohol. This cleans the surface well and it dries quickly. So I've already put it into a spray bottle. Seems to be the easiest way for me to work with it. And then I'm just sprayed it onto my paper towel and I'm just going to clean off the surface really good. So as you can tell, you can see my handprint there. There was a lot of stuff that we sanded off. Okay, I'm going to go to a clean section. I'm going to spray the paper towel again and wipe it down one more time. Now the nice thing is your alcohol evaporates super quick. So this will be dry quickly. I'm going to put it on a tumbler holder, okay? So this already has a foam on it, and this is a stand that you can just open up that will stand up so that while you're working on them and you've got different layers, everything will be perfect, fine, okay? Just let it sit there until it's dry. Okay, on this one, this project, I'm going to be putting down a base coat. Actually, it's a primer paint, all in one, which is our Bondago. And I'm choosing black because most of the time, black is a really good color underneath the majority of our foils. Just need to grab a brush here, okay? So I'm gonna get some of the paint out of the container. I always like to work off of a plate instead of normally out of a large container, and that way I can put the lid back on and make sure that our paint is staying fresh and not getting dried out. Okay, so as I indicate, Bondago is a paint and primer all in one, which is going to give us really good adhesion, meaning that this product is going to stick to our surface. And that really is important when you're working with foil transfers, that your base coat is adhering to the surface you're working on, because sometimes the foils are fused really well to the carrier sheet. And you got to make sure that your base coat is adhering better than the foil transfer, okay? So I do recommend primers. If you don't have Bondago, you can always do, like Rust-Oleum has some great products. They're 2-in-1 as well. And you can even just spray your tumblers. I'm so used to brushing all my layers. My spraying technique is definitely not as good as my brushing technique. But use and do whatever works for you. Okay, I have full coat on here. I'm just critiquing my brush strokes and trying to make sure that I have them as straight as possible, just so that I don't end up with a lot of brush strokes underneath my project. Okay, now this is going to have to sit and dry. Normally I'll let the Bondago dry for a few hours so that it has time to dry down really well before we go forward. So let's give it some dry time and we'll be back. So the Bondago has had a couple hours to dry down, and it seems like it's completely dry, which I left it for like 3 to 4 hours, okay? Our next step is going to be our foil adhesive, and we are working with our brand, Artsyville Embellishments Foil Adhesive. Love this stuff. I'm going to give you guys a peek inside the jar. Okay, so this is a big gallon container. We carry it in many different sizes, so don't let this absolutely scare you away. You can see that it's milky white in the container, and I like to go ahead and get this out of the container. How to get a clean brush here. Okay, I like to take it out, put it on what I call a sticky plate, and that way you can add water or at least have a place to kind of work with it. Also, you're going to have your container closed back up, which is going to keep your product staying fresh. Now, when I do brush on the foil adhesive, I normally like to add just a tiny bit of water, okay? This is a mist spray bottle, not a regular spray bottle, so it only squirts out just a tiny bit, but it will allow you to add a little bit of water. So it thins down the foil adhesive so that it just brushes on smoother, okay? Now, if you opened your jar and it's perfectly fine with the consistency, use it just as is. Sometimes as it gets older and we've been in and out of our buckets for a long time, it can get a little bit thicker. Or if you just feel that it's not brushing on smooth enough, try to keep it down to about 2 or 3% water. Okay, don't add too much. We don't want to lose the tack. We just want to thin it down so that it brushes on a little bit smoother. And as you can see, it is going to brush on milky white, just like it looks in the container, but it will dry completely clear. So you're going to want to let this dry for at least an hour. It'll clear out in probably about 15-20 minutes, but I always find, oops, got a little extra goodie here. Let's pick that out. I always find that the longer you allow the foil adhesive to dry, the better chance it has to getting to a nice, firm, hard tack, and will provide you with the best foil release it can. So don't worry about allowing it to dry for a few hours or even overnight. The foil adhesive will never dry beyond a firm tack. So it is going to remain sticky forever. And we have kind of put that through the test, not on purpose, but occasionally we find something laying around here that's had foil adhesive on it for a long, long time, and it's still tacky and it will still transfer. Okay, I'm just coming back and checking my brush strokes, just trying to make sure I have as smooth of an application as possible. And like I said, we've got to let this dry, so we're just going to stand this tumbler up and let it dry for at least an hour. So our base layers are all ready to go. We have our black paint, we have our foil adhesive, it's been dry for a couple hours, and we have what's called a firm tack. You should be able to hear that. So it's gonna feel tacky as far as like a firm tack, but not sticky where it will ever get on you. When it's in this stage, you guys be careful. It can get on, or I should say anything can stick to it. Okay, and just as I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to clear off my area, make sure there's nothing on here that will get stuck. And we are going to use this beautiful foil called Pink Blossom as our base coat, okay? So we're going to do a foil over a foil. Isn't that beautiful? So I'm going to lay the foil out just nice and flat, and just be prepared that most likely you're going to get a wrinkle or a crinkle or something, okay? It never seems to go on completely perfect. So I'm going to roll back first, and then I'm just keeping a little tension, not a lot, but just a little tension on it as I allow it to roll. And that seems to be the best for the application, just a slight tension. And then I'm going to cut off my excess just because it will be out of the way, and grab my scrubber brush, which is just a plastic bristled scrub brush. This is like a nail brush from the Dollar Tree. I like them because they're shorter bristles and they stay stiff. And you are going to scrub the entire surface. Just go back and forth a few times. I'm back to where my seam is and just making sure I have gotten good coverage on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peek, okay? Always lift up the carrier sheet, and I can still see on the carrier sheet that there is some of the metallization still there, and we can see a little bit of the black peeking through. So I'm going to put it right back into place. I'm going to scrub again and see if I could get more of that foil to release, which it did. It's almost like a perfect release there, okay? So just pull it back, release it, and then allow it to fall. It'll just fall right back into place. And if there is any of the foil still on the carrier sheet, it should be right back into the spots that it did not attach the first time. And I just keep doing this process over and over. Just pull it back a little bit. Scrub again. Make sure you're also scrubbing that little edge there, okay? Because like I said, it tapers at the top and bottom a little bit with this particular design. Your cup might not do that, but just make sure you're getting as much coverage as you can as you are pulling it off. And I want to say most of the time with a foil transfer, I'm always going to release it, peek, and let it fall back into place and scrub again, just so that I can make sure I have the best coverage. Okay, this should be about our last section, okay? I did not let it come all the way off. That way you won't have to reposition it. And that's the nice thing is when you're peeking underneath and letting it fall right back into place, it does. Okay, so this time I'm gonna pull from the seam line back and release, and then let that go back into place. Now here I'm gonna be a little bit more careful because I have that seam going. And I don't want to use my scrubber brush because I now have this section that has completely been released, and you could scratch the foil, okay? So I'm just gonna rub that edge really well. And again, we'll peek and make sure that we have good coverage. Get that edge. And I'm gonna remove the last piece. So we had a super, super great transfer here. And that color is gorgeous. So now I wanna do the bottom as well. So I'm just gonna set it over the foil and then just tilt it so that I can scrub the base as well. And make sure we've got good coverage back here. And if there's any of the edges, sometimes it's just even good to use your finger and just scrub a little bit and make sure you've got as close to 100% coverage as possible. Now there is that little recessed area on the bottom. You can either try to just grab another piece using your fingernail. You can get that to set down into that area. As you can see, it's rubbing off where I'm just putting it on there and then just allowing my fingernail to go into that recessed area. Make sure you're using a new section every time so that you have foil on there to release. Okay, I'm going to say we've done pretty good, okay? We've got a gorgeous, gorgeous cup going. And again, this is our pink blossom. Okay, I'm wanting to do a foil over foil. I always feel it's best to isolate between my layers, which means you could pour a layer of epoxy, or as I'm going to do, I'm just going to put down a clear coat. We're going to use our final coat, and I'm going to apply a couple of layers of final coat on here to make sure that this layer is completely protected. So if anything goes wrong with the next layer, this layer is protected and we don't have to worry about it. So let's grab a plate and a brush. Okay, I'm just going to pour some of the final coat out onto my plate. The final coat goes on super thin and dries really quick. So it's a nice clear coat to use and also to provide protection in between your layers. Okay, this will dry in about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to apply a second layer and then we're going to foil again. So on this project, we are going to do a foil over a foil, and we have this gorgeous pink blossom down already. And I'm going to isolate with a layer of epoxy in between my layers of foil. So I have mixed part A and part B together, and I've got them into just a little container. I have approximately, I think, 25 milliliters, but definitely check how much product you need depending on the size of the cup you're working on. I do recommend that you stir up your epoxy super well. I like to stir it for about 2 minutes total, okay, which I know seems like a long time, but you want to ensure that part A and part B are mixed together well. That is one of the things that will possibly prevent you from having a good cure to a nice hard surface, is if your products are not equally measured and or stirred well together. Okay, I'm going to take what is called diamond dust, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of that to my mixture just to give this whole thing a little extra sparkle. So as you can see, that is absolutely gorgeous, and a little bit goes a long way. So maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon, maybe less, okay? I didn't measure just because I used that little stir stick, but like I said, a little bit goes a long ways. And I'm just going to stir that in there. Diamond dust is finer than glitter, but not as fine as mica powder, because mica powder will actually color your liquids, where diamond dust is just giving you the tiniest of little sparkle. Okay, I think we're stirred up well. I'm going to turn on my turner and get this moving around, and we are just going to go ahead and cover the entire cup with this coat of epoxy. And then once this dries, we will put on our foil, and that way it will also create a little bit more depth and dimension with having the epoxy in between the layers. So just as your turner is spinning, just spread out your material, okay, and get it to cover the entire surface. Your epoxies will look maybe a little bit hazy to start with, because as you stir it, you are forcing air into the mixture, which can make it look a little hazy. But we were going to clear that out with using a heat gun as well. Okay, I'm just making sure I have coverage from top to bottom. The bottom done as well with a layer of epoxy on there. Make sure everything is covered. Okay, once I feel like I have the whole thing covered, I'm going to go ahead and hit this with a blowtorch and just bring all the bubbles up to the surface. Okay, once you have your epoxy on and you have hit it with a heat gun, if you're not seeing any bubbles or any imperfections, then just go ahead and allow the tumbler to spin for as long as the epoxy that you're using is recommending, okay? There are so many different epoxies out there, so just make sure you read the directions of the brand you are using and allow it to dry. So the first coat of epoxy has dried, and this is absolutely gorgeous. The pink foil with a little bit of diamond dust, so we got even more sparkle now. Okay, our next layer is going to be another coat of our Artsyville embellishments foil adhesive, because we're going to be doing a foil over a foil. So I am going to apply another full layer. Okay, now, like I said, this is the Artsyville foil adhesive. I've already taken it out of the container. I put it onto a plate because I feel it's just easier to work with. And if you find that it's not brushing on as smooth as you would like, grab a tiny bit of water. Okay, I'm just using a mist bottle, and you can just add a little bit of water and put it into your foil adhesive, mix it in well. And that's why I also like to do this on a foam plate, because I don't want to put any water in the actual jar. Okay, we're going to do a full transfer. So we are going to brush on another complete layer. And also, with doing the layers of epoxy in between the foils, you're going to continue to even add more depth and dimension to the whole project. So we're going to be coming over this with one of our transparent foils that is called Portia, and it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so full coat, just like the first layer, trying to make sure that my brush strokes are neat, going from end to end if possible. You also want to make sure you have complete coverage, because if you don't have any adhesive, you're not going to have any transfer in that area. So just critique, make sure you have complete coverage. I'm also going to do the end as well. So we're going to do the bottom, make sure that's covered, and then just double check my edge here. Okay, with foil adhesive, I really like to allow the stuff to dry to a nice firm hard tack. So I'm going to let it sit for a couple hours, let it dry to that point. You always want to make sure that you are allowing enough dry time, but it doesn't matter how long it does dry. So if you don't have time to finish this today, you could always come back to it tomorrow. Once it dries to a firm hard tack, it will not dry beyond. So we'll be back in a little bit and put our next layer of foil on. Okay, it's time to finish this beautiful tumbler up. And I want to teach you guys a little trick, because we're going to be using our Portia foil here. And as you can see, both sides look identical. So it's really hard to try to figure out at first which side is your transfer side and which side is the carrier side. So I'm just grabbing some blue tape, and I'm going to go to a corner where I know there's a lot of the foil pattern there. And I'm going to put the tape on there, and if it pulls off, then I know for sure that that is my transfer side. So I'm going to leave that in that position. We're going to grab our tumbler, and we're going to wrap this beautiful piece, okay? We're going to do a full wrap. So I'm just letting it roll back to, I know where it caught the seam, okay, the starting of it. And it's best to really put almost like no pressure on the foil, okay, and just kind of hold it in place as you allow it to spin, and just kind of doing its own weight, and then just wrap it up. Okay, we're going to use our wonderful little scrub brush once again, and this is just a Dollar Tree nail brush that I'm using to scrub. And the thing with the transparent foils is it's super important to make sure that you scrub the edges, okay? And I'm going to demonstrate here in a minute, but I'll actually come back with my toothbrush and make sure that I have scrubbed the edges. And part of it is because the clear foils, transparent foils, okay, because you can see through this. That's why we did a 2-layer foil, so we can see that beautiful pink underneath. But they can do what we call over release. So we want to make sure that we've really scrubbed this edge, top and bottom, so that when we're pulling them off, we're not going to have any over release. The other thing is, if you guys want to check it out and just learn a ton about the transparent foils, I have a tutorial here on my page, okay, or my channel, I should say. that is all on working with transparent foils. So make sure to head to that and check it out. Okay, so we're gonna get started here. And normally I have to kind of really like pull and tug because we want to make sure that we're getting a full release, because these foils come off more as a film than they do as a metallization. Okay, so here we had a little bit of over release. I'm just going to remove that and push it down, and that's why we want it to get those edges scrubbed really well. And I'm just critiquing as I'm pulling, making sure that we're getting a full release here, which you should with the transparent foils. And we just about have this done. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That came out gorgeous. Okay. So I like to take a really soft cloth. Okay, so I like to grab a really soft cloth. This is like that t-shirt material, so it's super soft. And that way you can rub on the foil if there are any air bubbles or anything. You're not going to scratch or damage the foils, but you can rub on here really well. And you can rub on them even before you release the carrier sheet, just to make sure that all the bubbles are out. Now I want to also do the bottom. So I've got another piece of foil here, and we're going to do that test again. Okay, it didn't come off, so we're going to flip it over. Okay, definitely know that that is the transfer side. And then just find a piece, set it on. We'll just come in here with our toothbrush and get the bottom of this with our foil. I just want to make sure the whole design is releasing. Yeah, so we got a big over release. Okay, I must have not scrubbed as well on that edge. If you get any of that, you can take your soft cloth and just rub those edges and make sure it's laying down flat. But isn't that gorgeous? Okay, even the depth we have from using that diamond dust in the background, oh, is just giving it so much more dimension and shimmer. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna finish this off. So grabbing my turner, we're gonna put our cup back on here. I'm just making sure my foam is shoved in there really good so I don't get any epoxy on it. Okay, so once we have it on the turner, I just want to make sure that it is pretty level there. You can even get a tiny mini level and just make sure, because when they're spinning, you want them to try to be as level as possible. Okay, we're gonna glove up. And I am using Mr. Nola's epoxy for this project. Okay, let me show you guys the containers. And I've already poured them out and pre-measured. So I'm gonna start with B, okay, because I like to put B in first. And I have a little over, I think it's 10 milliliters of each, okay? So I'm moving it into a larger container because it's just easier to stir, but I want to try to get all of that out because I've measured precisely, okay? This is one thing that is so important when working with your epoxy or resins, is to make sure you're measuring really well. Okay, so once I have B in there, I'm going to grab my A and put that in. And A is a thicker consistency, and I have always found they're easier to mix together if I pour the B in first. Let me make sure I've got this out of the way for you so you can see what I'm doing. Not that it's super exciting, but I'm just scraping this really well. Trying to make sure I have all of it so I still have equal parts. Now we can mix this together. Again, like the first coat, you're going to want to stir this for at least 2 minutes. Make sure that you're scraping your sides, scraping the bottom, and you have it mixed super well. Once you're mixed up really well, make sure you have some plastic underneath just in case we get any drips. It's going to go on our plastic and everything will be fine. I'm going to turn the turner on so it's starting to move and spin, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour this on here. I'm going to use my hand to move it around. This is always the fun part. So I just like to smooth it out with my hand, make sure that I don't have any area where I've got a buildup of the epoxy and that it's level. If I've got too much on there, I can always take some off with my fingers. And then once I feel like it is, I have enough product and it is everywhere. I don't have any low spots, okay, or high spots. We don't want either. And that's the beauty of the turner. It's going to continue to spin and keep the material level as it dries. Okay, I do like to take a blowtorch, okay, and I definitely have a big one. You guys can use smaller ones than this. And I'm going to heat it up because it is going to bring any of the bubbles to the top of the surface and clear it out even more. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going to let it spin until it is dry, and that is it, okay? So make sure that you check the amount of product you need for the size tumbler you are on. This is, I believe, a 20-ounce plump or a 24-ounce plump. So I used approximately 20 to 22 milliliters of material total. And then also read the epoxy that you're using for the dry time that is needed, okay? Thank you guys for joining me here on this tutorial. There will be a complete list of all of the products in the description below. And do us a big favor, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials.